excited to see such a tight fight for number one in the women's game. I think that is definitely a part of the entertainment that we've been missing for a few years.
Yeah, as far as I know, there were 10 night matches on Philippe Chatrier. What I want to know is how many of those 10 matches were women's matches?
Was it recently the umpire refusing to get down from the chair and actually look at the line? That's the umpire's fault. That umpire should not be umpiring, because you should always get down from the chair and check if you're being asked. And the only reason I'm going to say that is because I think her form is peaking in the clay season at just the right time.
Sounds strange, but I don't really have a lot of confidence in Novak or Carlos, really. Welcome back to the Getting a Grip podcast. It is that time of the year. We are now in the throes of the French Open. It starts on a Sunday, which is slightly different from most of the other Grand Slams, which it does throw me off a little bit. But I don't know, it's nice to start on a Sunday, because then more people are still off from work and they can go and see those earlier round matches. So that's nice. We're going to give our predictions later on in the podcast, but we're going to get into some questions, some current and historical questions from the French Open, and delve into some talking points. Let's see if Merlin can improve on his score from last time, which was, I think, 3 out of 5. So, first question. So this one is a lady's question about Swiatek. So obviously she won last year. She won the French Open last year. So she's going for back-to-back titles this year. What I want to know is, when was the last time a female player in the singles side won back-to-back French Opens? So your options are 2002, 2004, 2007, or 2012. Kicking off with a historical one.
That is a great question. I quite like that question, but I also don't like the fact that trying to remember it is a challenge.
Well, I'll spread out the years a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? You have indeed spread it out to make it a little bit harder for me. I guess, who am I looking at possibly having had done this? Just go for it again. The options.
02, 04, 07, or 12.
And is the year you're giving me the year they win their second one in that row?
Yeah, the year they win the most recent second one. Yeah,
and it's the most recent time that's been done.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the noughties. I don't feel like it's been done recently, because this could be a sort of comparative dilution of the fact that Rafa's won again, and then no news about the women's final seems to portray or penetrate any of the tennis news that year.
What
I'm just
players are you thinking of?
Henin. I remember her winning, but I can't remember when it was. I remember her winning like a few in the noughties. It was probably 4 or 5 out of the 10 years. I'll go with 7.
Final answer?
Yeah.
That is correct. Well done.
Is it Henin as well? Was it her?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, good.
Wow, well done. So she actually won 4 French Opens in 03, 05, 06. Oh, so she won 3 in a row. And that 07 was like the last of those 3. So that's why I said back to back, because then it hadn't been done since then. So she won 3 in a row, and no one had even won back to back since that time. I thought it might throw you off a little bit, because we had like Serena Williams and Sharapova had like a little spell of dominance. But
I don't think they ever won back-to-backs, did they? Well, I guess that's the point of the question, isn't it? They didn't win back-to-back French Opens. Yeah, exactly. That's the answer. But yeah, I always think of it, especially with the women's game, as being something that sort of throws people a little bit. Like the French Open isn't quite what you'd expect. And as clay goes, like there's a reason that the French Open courts are as long as they are, as far back, because the style of tennis becomes even more grindy, and it doesn't suit everyone. Um, so yeah, like I say, I think it's a great feat if you can maintain some dominance on that specific Paris clay. Um, yeah, no comments on Rafa at the moment.
Yeah, well, you're right, because everyone always talks about the men's side and having one player dominate, but on the
Yeah.
women's side, it's like, yeah, almost been in the opposite direction, really. Yeah, Sharapova and Serena did have like, there was 4 years where it was like one won it and then the other one won it, and then it was basically swapping over.
Yeah.
But yeah, even when I guess Serena was pretty dominant, she didn't manage to, monopolize it as much as it has been on the men's side. So, and then I suppose now we kind of think, oh, it's Swiatek's stronger surface, but there are a couple other players that are, vying for that title this time, which we'll talk about a little bit later, which is going to make it a bit more interesting. Good. Okay. So 1 from 1. On to the men's side. So we know the news now that obviously Rafa is not playing. Obviously Roger retired last September. So that's 2 of the big 3 not there. What I want to know is, what was the last French Open final without Rafa, Roger, or Novak? It's the last final without anyone. What year was
Cast me
that?
back there.
So they obviously have options again. So they are 2002, 2004, 2005, or 2006. So the options are a little bit more tricky this time, a bit closer together, because I feel like you'll have a decent idea of when Rafa first won the French Open. So you're probably going to be thinking around that time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we are going back quite a few years. Give me the options again, just so I've got them all in my front of brain.
02, 04, 05, 06.
Right. And this is a final without one of those lot.
One of the big 3, yeah.
Doesn't have to be them winning it. Well,
No.
I say that.
Well, they inevitably do when they get to the final, unless they play each other.
Yes, that is it. That's just the same with any tournament, isn't it? And hence the legend status. Oh God. My brain wants to say that it was '05 that Rafa won his first one, because that's when he burst onto the scene. Because it was sort of early on in Roger's dominance of the grass. And I remember it sort of being like, well, yeah, Roger's dominant on the grass, but yeah, there's a new guy on the clay who's making him look silly. And what happens if he gets good at grass and all that sort of talk? I remember,
it was worrying.
I vaguely remember some of that.
That was a dread that I had. I was like, this guy's coming for Federer.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, wait, hang on, this guy's dominant, but this guy's also sort of dominant at the same time. So I'm going to say the last time without is 2004, because I'm pretty sure '05 was the year that Rafa both got there and won it. Because I don't think he got to the final and didn't win. I don't think that's possible of him, to be quite honest. Unless Federer is the person he's playing against, or Djokovic. Or, no, not Murray. Murray is fine.
2004 is your final answer?
Yes.
That is correct again. Well done. Spot on with all of those points. So yeah, 2005 was the first time he won it. So in 2004, that's when he first came up against Federer at the French, which was in the semi-final, and he managed to beat him in 4 sets. And that was sort of, the time when we all took notice, he just sort of, he did beat Federer in Miami, I think, that year before. But this is straight on a Grand Slam stage at the age of 17, 18. Which is crazy until, Alcaraz has come along and done incredibly well as a teenager. That was, the first time in a while that someone had done that. But it more just goes to show how kind of closed off the French Open and most of the Grand Slams have been, right, for the last 20 years, really. To not have one of these big 3 in the final, it's taken 20 years. And that's because two of them are injured.
That's
Or one of them's
it's
retired,
nuts.
sorry, and one of them's injured. So, and yeah, it kind of just basically tells you that this is going to be the most open French Open in the last 20 years.
Oh
It
God.
is French Open.
Yes.
But we're going to talk more about our predictions later on anyway. But I think it just makes it a little bit more exciting. As long as it's not like this every time, because I think you need to have some, you need to know that there's a couple of players that are going to be there. But I think it's good every once in a while to have just a bit of unpredictability about it and see kind of who takes that opportunity, which can kind of, catapult your career a little bit. I'm looking at you, Casper Ruud, and those other guys in their mid-20s that haven't won a Grand Slam. Okay, 2 from 2. So back to the women's side. This time, it's a question to do with this kind of big three that we've started to talk about or started to become mainstream.
Okay.
So
less historical, this one.
This one is very current. This one is looking to the future, in fact. So we've been talking a lot about rankings in recent weeks, especially you when you ask me questions. You like a good rankings question. So Sabalenka could actually replace Swiatek as the world number one after this tournament. So what I want to know is, she'll be able to replace Swiatek as number one if Swiatek does not get to which round? So does not get to which round?
Oh, I've got to calculate.
Well, I mean, yeah. The 4 options are the 4th round, the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, or the final.
Oh.
This is a good one.
Oh, let the maths brain tick away for a moment.
I don't know if you'll be able to maths this week.
I don't know if I can.
I don't even know how to work it out.
Remember where they are in points.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Because remember, Swiatek is defending the title, so that makes it more difficult for her.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That is a very good point. Oh, God. Are we assuming that Sabalenka wins? Or are we in this scenario? Or is it just if Swiatek fails to make a certain round that she overtakes her, regardless of her results? So basically, assuming she wins nothing.
I think it's the assuming she wins nothing. I'll have to double check that.
Okay, I can no, I prefer that because that's only one calculation. It's working. That I can deal with.
Interestingly, Sabalenka was nearly 6,000 points behind Swiatek when they went into the Australian Open this year. But this week she is less than 1,400 points behind.
Oh, thanks for that. That makes the maths easier.
I don't know if it's going to help that much or not.
It'll have to be if she doesn't make... Right, so if she wins a quarterfinal, right? So this is my logic here. She wins 500 points, 500 ranking points from the 2,000 that she currently holds. But if she only wins 500, that's not enough. Because she's missing 1,500 and the difference is 1,400. So it's if she doesn't make the semi-final.
I might have to correct this question. Sorry, correct the answer. So keep going with the scenario where regardless of what she does.
So if she makes the semi-final and loses, she still doesn't get enough ranking points to maintain this placehold over Sabalenka. Because winning in a semi-final will only get you 1,000 points. No?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you're correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So what's your final answer?
In which case, she has to make the final in order to maintain first place. Because otherwise she's lost too many points. She has to win a semi-final in order to get enough points. If she loses a semi-final, she makes the semi-finals, that doesn't matter because she's won 500 points on doing that. So therefore, she has to make the final in order to do it. Because you're asking me what round does she have to get to, right? You're not asking me what round does she have to win.
Yes. Yeah, so if she does not get to which round? So,
okay, so in which case, I'm going to say the final.
Are you sure? Are you sure that's your final answer? Because remember, Sabalenka also has to, like, you have to think about how she got on last year as well, as to how many points that she's.
Yeah, but you're assuming she wins nothing, right?
Yes. I'm questioning the information I now have. But okay,
because I'm sure she's got some points, but it'll be a few hundred difference, and I still think that within that 1,000.
Okay, you go with your answer. I've got my.
I'm going to go with the final, but you've got your answer. I think I obviously have got different answers. I think your answer is probably the semi-finals she has to make, whereas I think she has to make the finals in order to ensure that she doesn't get overtaken.
So you're saying final?
Oh, I want to get it right. I almost don't want to be right. I would rather get your answer right.
So but what if that is right?
Oh, for God's sake. Oh, no, you faded out on that one. If the answer is final, I will kill you. I'm going to say semi-final.
That is correct. Yes, well done.
Thank you.
But it's confusing me because different websites are phrasing it differently. So I've said if she does not get to the semi-finals, whereas this one is saying if she doesn't reach at least the quarterfinals. So it means the same thing. But yeah, I don't know. She
has to at least get to the semi-finals, yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But so to be safe,
yeah,
she has to make the final, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So yes. But it was about Sabalenka replacing her, right? Not about her keeping the number one spot. So anyway, that's besides the point.
The same thing, isn't it?
The whole point of the question is that there's a chance that she gets toppled in the rankings and that she's not as far away from everyone else as she has been in the past, right? So we're talking about Sabalenka potentially replacing her, but we're also talking about this big three because obviously Rybakina rose up the rankings a little bit last week, so she's up to, we say number 7 or something.
No, she went from 7 to 4.
7 to 4. There you go. So she's closing in as well.
She's not far behind Pegula either. She only needs to do one round better, and then she's already in third place.
A more interesting question: who do you think will finish the end of year as number 1?
Oh, I would say Swiatek.
I have my prediction.
I didn't know we were predicting the year as well as the tournament. I would still think Swiatek would end as world number 1. But I think it could be a little bit of a scrap towards the end. I don't know. It's something that I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see such a tight fight for number 1 in the women's game. I think that is definitely a part of the entertainment that we've been missing for a few years. This has either been one person or no people. Whereas having sort of 2 or 3 sort of really in there, that's going to be good watching.
What do you mean, no people? So if it wasn't the world number 1, it was a nobody. Don't care.
No, you know what I mean. It was the world number 1 spot fluctuated more rapidly, whereas there was one dominant leader like Serena Williams, for example, at stages throughout her career, or Maria Sharapova for a short period, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I actually think that Rybakina will finish the end of year as number 1 because
I'd like that.
Is not defending as many points as well, and I think if she can just stay reasonably fit, then she's going to get to the last stages of most tournaments, I think, that she plays. And it's it's a bit worrying now actually because she's playing pretty well on clay as well. So we know how good she is on grass because of the serve. Hard court, arguably should have won the Australian Open, and now she's getting it together on clay. I think that's pretty scary.
Yeah, you're right. It could happen.
But at least like we said, it makes it interesting because Swiatek doesn't have a dominant kind of head-to-head record against either of those other two players as well. So
Quite right.
you
Yeah.
know, there's a bit of psychological stuff going on there, which is going to make it interesting should they come up against each other. Okay, so 3 from 3 eventually. I think you'll like this next one. This next one's probably a bit easier. So
I really hope the viewers didn't like that or did like the question that you just asked me, because if they understood it, power to them.
it's a hard question to phrase like correctly. It's a bit of a weird, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird way of phrasing it. So, next question. Obviously, the French Open is, you know, they're not using Hawkeye, so they're sticking with the traditional method of line calling at the moment. But as other Grand Slams are sort of moving forward a little bit with technology, I want to know how many Grand Slams currently use Hawkeye and electronic line calling. So, your options are simply 1, 2, 3, or 4.
You don't want to put 0 in there.
Well, no, because I feel like that's like, I mean, it's pretty obvious there is one definitely that uses both. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not 4, because I know for a fact.
Well, I just told you it wasn't.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
And I also then therefore know it's not 3, because I know Wimbledon still use sort of lines judges, because I mean, again, I don't know what they're doing this year. Perhaps but you know, there's much more of a culture around the way they do things, and you know, that's the way it's always been. So that's the way we're going to do it. You know, the grass courts being probably the prime example of that. So I would say it's either between 1 or 2. A little bit of logic here. I feel like I've only heard about it being 1. Well, I'm a little bit concerned. Oh, if I'm right or not. So it's either both or one of the hard courts.
Yes.
Yeah, we've worked that out. We've gotten that far. Oh, so the Australian Open definitely is. Now I'm toying with the idea of whether the US Open is. I'm gonna say 1.
Is that your final answer?
Ah, yes.
Get a grip.
Oh, it was
correct.
2.
The one question I thought was the easiest one, and he slipped up. Little banana skin in there. So yeah, the US Open does also use electronic line calling, or has just started from last year. I mean, I think the Australian Open only started in the last couple of years as well. Actually, no, the US Open used it during COVID as well, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah, that was what I was thinking about, and then I was like, I'll tell you what put me off. What put me off was thinking about when Djokovic got defaulted for hitting the lines judge,
You
and
always
that made
think
me
about
think,
that one.
oh, maybe they weren't using electronic lines calling, and so that put the doubt in my head. So I should have gone with what I originally thought. Oh well. Whereas
Oh, yeah, maybe they didn't use it. They were still using line judges, were they?
still using line judges then when Djokovic hit the lines judge.
Clearly. That's why they got rid of it, just because of that one incident. Although I suppose,
Yeah. Come to think of it, I
safety-wise.
feel like I remember an article like, "Oh, Djokovic can't get defaulted this time," and then I remember seeing a picture of a robot lying on the ground with him standing over it.
Yeah, unless he just smashes it at like the scoreboard or something. Oh dear, yeah. So basically, yeah. What I find interesting is that that Wimbledon and French Open, probably to more of an extent, are trying to hold on to this sort of tradition kind of
Yeah,
mantra. I don't know. What do you think about that? Should we just does that really matter? Like, is it going to make that much of a difference to the overall feel of the tournament or the matches?
I mean, in many ways, this is a debate in itself for one of its own podcasts. But what I would say, my nutshell opinion on this is that let them continue doing what they know and like doing at those tournaments, because sometimes, again, as we've spoken about in the past with the Masters events compared to the Grand Slams, it's nice having your novelties, and it's nice having things that one tournament does that maybe not all of the others do. Bit confusing for the players maybe, who are like, oh, that's clearly out, why aren't you looking at that? Oh, that's not what we do here, we do something different, maybe a bit confusing for them. But for me as a viewer, it's nice having a little bit of variation in how things are done. Grass court Wimbledon, love the lines judges, the whites, all of that. It's part of it, right? And I think that will stay for a very long time. I know the ATP are like forcing it on them at some point in the next 5 to 10 years. But I'm hoping they'll keep the lines judges as well. They'll just have the electronic line calling as a sort of it's there, but we're more going to use the fact that they're shouting out. And then as for French Open on clay, it's so obvious when a ball is out. I know. There's like these scenes of like umpires. Oh, what was it recently? The umpire refusing to get down from the chair and actually look at the line. That's the umpire's fault. That umpire should not be umpiring, because you should always get down from the chair and check if you're being asked. But otherwise, play is so easy. Just look. Oh, look, it's in or it's out, and it's so easy to tell.
Is it? What if there's a
Yeah,
little bit
it's
of
so easy. It's so easy
up
to
of
tell. Like
dust
the
there?
people that can't get those calls right, they're pathetic, honestly. So yeah, there you go.
Wow, tell us how you really feel. Come on.
Yeah.
Are you sure though? Is it 100% accurate if you're just looking at the mark from the ball on the clay and not using the like slow-mo or electronic replay?
I think the mark is pretty indicative. Like you have knowledge of what the ball was doing before, so the way it was going to bounce. Therefore, you know where it did bounce. You look in that area, you see the mark that represents the speed and the height and the type of ball that was hit, and then you go, oh yeah, that's not on the line, that's out, or it's a bit of that's on the line, so it's in. Like it's not that hard. Honestly, in my personal opinion, clay is so easy. That's why they don't bother having Hawkeye, for example, a lot of clay tournaments, because why would you need to when you can see it? It's right there.
I think though it would make it would make umpires' lives a lot easier if they just introduced it anyway. Because if there is some dispute over the line call for whatever reason, the players can always direct that anger of how the match is going, not even about the actual line call, towards the umpire. I mean, I know that's not the umpire's fault, but
No,
when you introduce
well, sometimes.
an electronic system, then it just puts that separation between the
Yeah.
umpire and the match that's actually going on, and then they can't direct that anger. Well, they can still direct some anger, right? Remember Medvedev in the Australian Open or whatever, having a go at the umpire for something different. But I don't know. I think it will just make life easier for umpires because it just
I tell you,
sort of
I tell you what, I
depersonalizes
tell you what. Part of this for me,
it.
it broadens two schools of thought in my head. One is I love the way tennis is run at the moment. I love the umpiring, the lines judges, etc., etc. Um, and I do. I enjoy watching it, and I enjoy some of that drama. As a viewer, you're going to enjoy that drama. Everyone watching at home, they're going to enjoy that drama. And that's one of the things people at a club level really like, because they'll play the game and they get to see people taking it too far and exaggerative and all that sort of stuff. And it's fun. It's like sort of something that other people get to watch, and it makes you feel slightly, it's something to enjoy. But at the same time, another school of thought in my head is umpires are really, really bad. Most of them are really, really bad, very underqualified, and quite shocking at managing, not only because, again, I don't understand. They never go through training where they're having to manage a stadium, for example. I know that's not necessarily something you could train, but it's part of it. You're managing the players, the stadium, and then the match and the court and the scoring. It's a lot to do. If you're not wired, confident, and able to project yourself, which I think a lot of these umpires are not, then they're going to get crushed, and that's why these arguments happen, because they're indecisive.
Very good point.
That's my view.
We shall leave it on that point. Let us know in the comments what you think about this whole, yeah, umpiring versus electronic line calling kind of debate. So 3 from 4, not 4 from 4. You slipped up on that last question. Despite
We can
being
re-record
very
it if you want. I'm very happy to get it right, if you'd prefer that.
no.
No? Okay.
No.
Sure.
How many times I've got questions wrong and we've never
Yeah.
re-recorded. Okay, last question. So this pertains to last year's tournament, and there's been a bit of talk about it in the lead up to this year's edition, and that is the topic of night matches.
Ah,
Woo!
yeah.
Yeah. So last year, as far as I know, there were 10 night matches on Philippe Chatrier. What I want to know is how many of those 10 matches were women's matches. So your options are as
Ooh,
follows: 1, 3, 4, or 5.
interesting. So sort of how harsh have they been?
Pretty much.
Um, so they wouldn't be. I guess the point of this question is that you're asking it because it's not evenly split. So I feel like it's not five. Interesting. Yeah. One, three, five, four,
1, 3, 4, or 5.
one, three, four, or five.
But you're on the right track with your thinking.
So it's not even. Okay, okay. Well, it's got to be on the lower end then, surely. Three's sort of calling out to me because I feel like one would be too painfully obvious. Hmm. I'll go with three.
Get a grip. That is incorrect.
One, isn't it? It's just fucking one.
It is, oh, as they would say in French.
Yeah.
One match, which was Elise Cornet against Yelena Ostapenko. So, a French lady. But yeah, it kind of just shows you how extreme the split was last year, and why there's been a lot of talk this year about how are we divvying up who's on the night matches. Obviously, Maresmo just took over last year as the tournament director. You would think maybe a female tournament director, you'd be like, oh, there's going to be a few more, women's matches taking center stage. But they basically cited, TV audience demand, because obviously, the night match is kind of for a global audience as well. So
Yeah.
they were saying that the demand is mainly coming for those men's matchups. But I think this year it could be a bit different, because I think there's a few more rivalries on the women's side that are gonna pique interest compared to well, obviously last year with the men's you had Rafa in there, so straight away
Mm.
there's going to be a few matches of his that are going to be in those night matches. But this year we don't have him on the men's side, so that's probably a few less matches already on the men's side. And then I think obviously
Yeah.
with the talk of this big three on the women's side, people are going to be interested to see how each of those players do, as well as a couple of the other players as well. So I think you should look this year for more, maybe not. I don't think it's going to be 50-50 still, but I think closer to like 4 of the 10, or maybe they're going to do more than 10, could be women's matches. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this general? we always talk about prize money, and then we talk about like when we talked about that Masters event, it didn't even have Monte Carlo doesn't even have women's matches being played.
Yeah.
Things like that. There's always this, the money is obviously greater on the ATP side of things. Like, I don't know, what do you think about the kind of split of these night matches? Because I think it's quite symbolic of the overall kind of, not fight, but the battle that's kind of going on between men's and women's viewership of their matches.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when it comes to basically why night matches exist. I think that's part of the problem in itself. Is we should be organizing a schedule where that isn't a problem. A lot of people argue that you should start earlier in the day, and that would, sort of alleviate some of this. A lot of the time, night matches happen because, it's the last one scheduled in a day, and it's shoved to the end of a schedule because a couple of matches have been a bit too long, and that's just how tennis works, for example. And it is a risk of a tournament, so players sort of have to be prepared to do that. But it is a bit ridiculous if you're playing at like 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. Especially if you've got to play in 2 days' time, right? You've played into the morning. You've not actually slept that day. You can't then use your other day for rest/training or whatever because it's sort of ruined. So yeah, it's a really, really tough question. And what I always wonder is how could I relate it back to sort of how everyone else runs their day-to-day life. And what I would say is it's like being asked to do a night shift and then coming into work immediately the day after. It's sort of like that in terms of a tennis scheduling scenario. It's not necessarily like you get the break that you should be getting. So therefore, we should be doing everything we can to avoid it. So there's the problem. Okay, so if we're trying to limit it, that would hopefully remove the issue of the viewership aspect of that. Because again, like we're talking about, we put men's matches on in those prime times because it brings in more money. That's a fact. So it's not a good fact, but it is a fact. And it also brings more viewers, more money. It's the same thing, really. But how you change that? Okay, maybe women's tennis is getting to a point where starting to get rivalries and stuff like that that will encourage more people to be interested in the women's side of the game. But at the same time, it might never reach that same level because obviously people have this ingrained opinion, not necessarily the right opinion either, that men's tennis is better, more intense, more skillful, whatever they want to say on their argument that will inevitably be probably wrong. But like I say, all of these things exist. So changing that now, I don't know if it's necessarily the answer. I think there's another way to fix it. I think that night matches and the unbalanced viewership, it's a symptom of the problem. But fixing that, it's not going to make any solutions.
Interesting. So you think they should just start earlier in the day?
I think that is part of the issue. I think that would help. Because I think night matches is something that, regardless of who you are, you could argue here that actually it's favourable. The fact that it's fewer women are getting pushed into the night matches, it's actually favourable in that regard because they're not having to play later. And therefore it's not impeding on their next day of rest or training before their next matches. Whereas with the men, they get put on ridiculous times, for example, all because they're trying to maximize viewership in another country or region of countries. And it does become, obviously rough for the schedule. So you could argue here it's a good thing and you could argue here it's a bad thing. But we're not making that decision as a community when to put those matches on because one is going to be better than the other or anything like that. It's just sort of capitalist, which is inherently a little sexist. But
yeah, it's sort of become a natural thing that most tournaments are doing now, right? They're having these night matches. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously been a big thing in the Australian Open for a while and the US Open. I don't know, I guess they see it as like it adds to the spectacle. I don't know, the night match under the lights, it's all part of the marketing and trying to attract people to watch. But they could just start. Yeah, I suppose the argument against starting earlier is the fact that can fans get into the complex at such a time? That's probably the argument against starting earlier. But then again, these night matches are tailored towards a global audience anyway. So it's like, who's really prioritized here? It's a difficult one. So yeah, maybe the issue is more actually it's worse playing night matches rather than the fact that there's less women's matches being shown at this time. But again, I think it's just symbolic of that eternal battle between the men's and women's game in terms of viewership and stuff.
That's where I agree with you. You're right. It is symbolic. It's a symptom of that wider problem.
Mm.
That is, we have this idea that people only really, really want to watch women, that want to watch men's tennis, for example. Whereas I don't necessarily think that's true. A lot of the time, I think it's because it's on. You're like, oh, I'll watch that one then. It's quite hard to access women's matches. So if you improve the access, make the access equal opportunity for people to watch both, then you will see improvements in that balance.
Yeah, it's I almost liken it to like women's football where no one really knew what the audience was and how big it was until they started like using bigger stadiums, and then like, oh, they're actually like filling out these bigger stadiums in these bigger tournaments. It's like, oh, the demand is there. So you don't actually know until you actually try it to see how many people actually watch. And I think, there's more rivalries developing on the women's side. I think ultimately that's what it's about. It's about having a storyline behind it, right? Because I know, people think men play like higher quality tennis or whatever, but realistically, when we watched like Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, that was all about, right? I mean, they were amazing players, but the storyline behind it was a lot of the appeal, right? Everyone was in like one camp, and that's what made it high stakes. So I think it's more about actual rivalries than the actual top level of tennis that it is, because I think you'll play incredible tennis anyway, so it's not like you're going to be disappointed by the level of the points that they're playing. I think it's just about developing those storylines. All right, so what did we get in the end? 3 from 5. You were doing so well.
Oh well.
So a few talking points there. Let's just quickly move on to our predictions for the actual tournament, because we are, it's just started as this goes out on Monday. The tournament there's already been a shock. In fact, Sakari is already out as we speak.
Indeed.
So can't pick her to win it if that's what you were going to do.
I wasn't going to.
No. Let's start on the women's side then. Do you have any dark horses, or you just think it's going to be one of those big 3 that's going to take home the trophy at the end of the 2 weeks?
I do think it'll be one of the big 3, if I'm quite honest. But you can't discount the likes of Pagula, for example, the likes of Goff. These players are in and around in a dangerous way. That I think that they would likely make deep runs, dark runs, dark horses. Oh god, too many analogies.
You don't want those dark runs.
They'll make go away. They'll make deep runs into the tournament for sure. So yeah, I'm excited to see it. But if I were pushed, I think that Rabaikina will probably come out on top in this one. And the only reason I'm going to say that is because I think her form is peaking in the clay season at just the right time. Whereas Swiatek started off quite strong quite early, and that's dwindled a bit, probably fatigue as well. Sabalenka's done well, but something about it that I get a feeling Rabaikina's probably gonna pull this one out the bag, because she got so close at the Oz Open, right? In many ways. So I think that experience is going to push her big time.
I was going to go for the same.
Isn't it? Just go for the same.
Yeah, I probably will go for the same. I'm trying to think in terms of the draw. Was it that Swiatek is in the same half as Rabaikina? She's in the same half as one of those two. Yeah, they are in the same half.
Yeah.
So, in one way, the draw maybe favours Sabalenka a little bit more in terms of a run to the final. But I think
I don't really believe. I never really believe in how the draw is structured. Outcomes the actual player who wins, because if they're going to win, they should be able to beat everyone anyway.
True, but
with those big 3, a bit more of a thing, I suppose.
Fatigue might play a part in it. I don't know, but I think actually, I think the winner will come from that semi-final. If they do both get there, who knows? There could still be a shock in there. But I think I'm going to pick the same winner on that side. I think she's finding a bit more consistency. very level-headed, as we said before, and I
Mm.
don't think she lost that. Oh, this is the old commentator cliche. I don't think she lost that Australian Open final. I think Sabalenka won it, but I don't think she
Yeah,
played
no, I see what
badly.
you mean.
I think Sabalenka just went to just like almost like a new level in that final, in that last
Well, that's
set.
the thing that all of those top three, they're capable of producing when they need it. It's well, not necessarily always when they need it, but they've shown that in certain matches they just turn it on, and that's it. They've won, which
Yeah,
Serena used to do week in, week out. We know that for sure.
yeah, I think, but Sabalenka did show a bit of vulnerability in losing early in Rome. But then again, I think
Yeah.
on the flip side, that gives her a little bit more rest. So it's hard to say. But yeah, I think Rybakina is looking the strongest at the moment. But who knows? There might be a few shocks in there. On the men's side, however, I mean, you would say it's a little bit more open. There's probably two guys that still stand out. Are you gonna go for one of those two guys, or are you leaning another way?
Oh, it's really tough because there's going to be a tournament, right? This is my brain's at the moment. There's going to be a tournament, right? We've talked about Sinner quite a bit, where he comes up, and there's going to be a tournament where something just clicks for him, and it all just goes into gear, and everything happens because it's all there. We're just waiting for it to all set in, as it were, at the same time. So, dark horse prediction in many ways. I think Sinner's going to win the tournament.
Ooh,
I'm
wow.
happy to stick my leg out here on the limb and say that because otherwise I'm just saying the same old answer I'd give to anything. It's either chiseled, dark-haired 19-year-old or chiseled, dark-haired 35-year-old, so 36-year-old.
Uh, what about Rublev? Could he make a deep run, do you think?
No, I don't think he's got the
No.
mentality for it. A deep run, a deep run, a deep run. I think a quarters, maybe a semi, for example. But I can't see him if he faces Djokovic, for example, or Alcaraz, for example. I think I don't know which side of the draw he's in actually. Um, I just don't see him coming through that.
Well, interestingly, Djokovic and Alcaraz are on the same half of the draw. So,
Yeah, I know.
oh, I don't actually know. I don't really have a lot. It sounds strange, but I don't really have a lot of confidence in Novak or Carlos,
No,
really.
no, I don't.
I just think Novak's had a few little like niggling injuries as well, which like there was something you
Mm.
mentioned last week. I don't know if it's elbow or wrist or something. He's always wearing this sleeve now. I don't know like what purpose there is behind that, whether it's like injury prevention or whether it's just a superstition. And then Alcaraz was doing really well, but then he had this shock defeat to that qualifier or whoever he was. I know it was only best of three, but yeah, the best of five I think still favors someone like Novak. So I think I'm just gonna have to go for him because he's just yeah that especially number 23 as well. That little carrot dangling there.
Oh yeah, that
That's a
donut
big
on a string
motivator.
is hanging there for him. He will be grabbing that. A
So
gluten-free donut.
yeah, it has to be gluten free. Yes.
Mm.
So I think I'm going to go with the boring prediction on that side, but I think someone like I think Tsitsipas will make a deep run again. I know how much you
Oh,
love that
really?
player.
Ah, joking, joking.
Casper Ruud as
Why
well.
not?
I think he should be looking to make the quarters or semis. And then I'm not sure. Like, there's been a few shocks even in the 250 events. It's just happened. Like Yari just went through and beat like three top seeded players in a row, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Fritz, Zverev, all got them all. Yeah.
yeah, it's very open. But I think mentality wise, even if he's not 100% physically, I think Novak will have enough once he just gets through those first few rounds. So I'll go with that one. But yeah, let us
I'm
know.
sure Novak will be comforted by Rafa not being in a draw. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. But then yeah, in a way, you feel like that sort of motivates him as well. That when Rafa is there, 'cause it's like, oh, this is like the challenge of beating him. But then I guess on the other side, it's like,
Mm.
yeah, now the pressure is more on him because it's like there's no one else really that should be beating him to the title. I mean, you could say Alcaraz, but he's still finding his way a little bit. But yeah, let us know your predictions on the women's and men's side. Very more open on the men's side, you could say, than on the women's side, which makes for a change really in recent times. Maybe there'll be more people watching the women's matches than the men's matches in the latter stages. Who knows? And yeah, obviously give us a follow on the different podcast platforms and on YouTube. Like it, share it around, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one.